Well, I am delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is the one and only Winston White, who is a former footballer who played over 500 times in professional football and now is now living out in the States. He played a lot of games for Burnley and Hereford United and Leicester. We're going to find a bit about Winston. Winston, it's brilliant to get you on the Godcast. How are you?
I'm great, Alex. Yeah, really great to be with you, sir.
I've got to ask, how on earth does Winston White go from playing at illustrious clubs as Burnley and Hereford United and end up in Florida?
Typical love of a good woman, Alex. That's the simple answer. Usually, that's the answer my wife tells me to give. Just really that. To be perfectly honest, I left the UK in 2007. Just as the economic downturn was kicking in. I was working for a US company, actually, a fitness company based in England, and I used to travel to the States all the time. So I really enjoyed coming to the States, particularly the warmer climates in the States, just such a huge country. And like I say, my heart was captured, and here we are today.
Do you miss much about the UK, Winston?
I do very much so. I still have kept my accent, hopefully. Every now and again, I do throw in an Americanism, but apart from that, I think I'm still very much British in my heart. And I do travel to England all the time. Obviously, the last few years has been a bit difficult, but I do try and get back as often as I can because it is my country, and I just love it there.
Do you keep following the game as well?
Oh, big time, big time. The coverage here in the US is far superior than it ever was in England. Believe it or not, they show pretty much every single Premiership game on different channels, so you can cherry pick what you want to watch. And most of the pundits now are English. People like your Lee Dixons, your Robbie Earls, your Robbie Mustos. They have about 5 or 6 different well-known pundits. So come Friday, Saturday, Sunday, my wife's a football widow.
Yeah. Winston, let me ask you. I think some of us arrogant Burnley fans kind of think Winston White only played for the Clarets, but as I said at the beginning, you had a long career. You started out at Leicester, is that right?
I did, yeah. Leicester. I was born and raised in Leicester. And that was my hometown club, and at 14, I was invited to play with Leicester City Academy at the time, and although I enjoyed playing it, I didn't see it as a future career. I knew I was good, but I never ever saw myself as being as good as what it needed to be a professional footballer. And in those days, in the 70s, it wasn't deemed as a secure career. So I took it lightheartedly, and before I knew it, I was invited to become an apprentice with Leicester City. So my brother, who was a semi-pro footballer, he played for a lot of good local teams, but never played a full pro game. He was my sort of advisor, stroke mentor, and suggested that rather than take up the options of going with an Aston Villa, who were chasing me, and Wolverhampton Wanderers, and a couple of them at home, try it for a couple of years and see what happens. The best advice I was ever given, because the day I made my debut for Leicester City was one of the best days of my life. And, when I look back at all those years, I look at that as the defining moment in my life, because once you become a professional footballer and you play for your hometown team, it's something that's beyond special, So yeah, my career was a long career. It's funny you said 500 because I played over 600 actually. Some of the stuff wasn't actually recorded in terms of league games, and I played out in Hong Kong. I played 80 plus games in Hong Kong, so I had a long career.
So listening to what you've said there, Winston, were you a little bit indifferent about becoming a pro footballer, or did you just thought, well, it probably won't happen, therefore not pin all my dreams on it?
Well, here's the thing, Alex. You know, in the Caribbean culture where I'm from, cricket's the big sport. And I'm one of four boys, and one of my brothers was a very talented cricketer, but again, just didn't make the cut. Now, I could play cricket, and I was also a very good sprinter, track and field. I was very good at 100 meters. I held a record for a long time. I ran for Leicester Boys, and I held a record for years for my county. And that was where I was looking towards getting involved with. But again, not as a pro, just as a hobby. I had my eyes on another career because my buddies went into that business. Believe it or not, gas fitting, right? So, some of my good friends who, I say, were a little bit older than me, left school before me. I looked at that as a great option because the money would seem to be decent and so on. Like I said, football, it just was just a fun thing to do.
Mm.
So, and the insecurities of it, and my dad was always kind of pushing to get me to play cricket. And anyway, I hated cricket, to be honest with you. But like I said, sport was just very much a hobby thing. So when the opportunity came, and I realized how good I was playing against players from all over, the country, and where Leicester City drew their young players from, and I realized that I was good, if not better, than most of them. I realized that this was a great opportunity. So my brother was spot on. I think he saw in me what I never saw. Yeah.
And just talking to other pros, there's always been a couple of key people, coaches wise, who've been pivotal to somebody's career. Who were the guys who were pivotal to your career at Leicester, Winston, and the people who stick out for you?
Yeah, Jimmy Bloomfield, is a name that never was given the credit that he deserved. But Jimmy Bloomfield was the manager at Leicester City at the time, and he was amazing because what he created was a fantastic team at the time. Some people of a certain age wouldn't know these players, but if we talk about Frank Worthington, we talk about Keith Weller, we talk about Steve Whitworth, we talk about Peter Shilton. Was under Jimmy Bloomfield. Mark Wallington. There was, a number of different players. Some local players that he brought through. He was what I honestly believe was sort of a modern day the coach that was at Manchester City at the time, Joe Mercer. He was like a Joe Mercer type figure. It could seem quite dour, but his teams always played attractive football.
Yeah.
And I was always a ball player. There's no question about it. I was a ball player, had speed, and you saw that at Burnley. So he encouraged me just to play with a freedom and an abandonment of responsibility that would get me through the games. I was always very fit. I prided myself on my fitness, so I could get away with it. And for years, he encouraged me. And the tragedy of it was that, and for a lot of footballers who can relate to this, is when a coach gets sacked, then it's not just the coach that loses his position. A lot of the times the players do as well. It's something that's never discussed as much in the open forums, but I know I suffered greatly with coaches being fired or sacked or leaving because a player needs continuity, and that continuity, especially as a young player, when it gets disrupted, it really does affect you. And Jimmy, as I said, was an incredible supporter of young players, and sadly, when he left, we finished in the highest ever position in the old First Division, which is now obviously the Premier League, and they sacked him. And the reason they sacked him was because they didn't think he was charismatic enough. What a reason to sack a manager. It takes my breath away still to this day. And I think that's one of the biggest tragedies of my game. So he was my role model. I looked up to him in so many different ways. But it was more so players than coaches, to be honest with you, Alex. I had such great admiration for players coming, that were there to help support young players. By its definition, footballers are selfish. There's no two ways about it. They are very selfish people. And I can understand that, because you have to be tunnel vision to make it in the game, particularly when you've got a lot of mileage on the clock like I have. But those players who take time out and understand that it's very much a team game, and if you can add value to the team, they can see that and they can help support you and encourage you and stay with you, for extra training sessions and stuff like that. You learn so much from senior pros, and I'm sure every other player will tell you that as well. Those senior pros who give their time and encouragement are the biggest role models in the game. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, yeah. And with the greatest of respect to Hereford United, you left Leicester to join them. What was that an exciting move for you, or was it one that was almost enforced upon you, or what was your thinking about that at the time, Winston?
I wasn't thinking, Alex. I've got to be honest. That was a mistake. What I needed was games. As a consequence of Jimmy Blumenfield getting sacked, they brought in a legend of Leicester, but unfortunately, not a very good coach at all. A guy called Frank McClintock. Frank, it was his first gig in football as a manager, and he just didn't cut it. Lovely guy, Frank, but just didn't have it, and he changed the whole format around. He gave me a few games, to be fair, a couple of games, and I did well. But he brought a few players in from Arsenal and a couple of others, and the younger players never got a look in. I mean, this is a youth team that had won youth cup tournaments for, I think, 3 years in a row, and we had people like Gary Lineker. We had people like a player called Larry May. I don't know if you remember him.
I do.
But, we had some really good young players coming through, and he never gave them opportunity. And so, as a consequence of that, I became, by that time I was like 20, 21. And by that point, especially in those days, you needed to play games. You needed to play matches. And I was good enough. There's no two ways about it. And so anyway, he got sacked because we got relegated that season. And Jock Wallace came in. Totally different contrast to everything else. And Jock made it clear that he was going to have a certain type of player. They seem to all speak Scottish, to be honest. And that's a fact. You can look at the history books. And, a lot of us seem to be surplus to requirements. So I asked for a move. And Hereford United had just appointed Mike Bailey, the famous Wolves player. And I spoke to Mike on a couple of occasions, and he was trying to build something great with young players from Aston Villa, Coventry, and so on. They had some good young players, and I saw it as an opportunity. But I dropped down divisions to play games because I knew I needed matches, and it was a mistake because I was better than that. I was much better than that. And although I played a lot of games for Hereford, and I'm still very popular there, my game suffered because of it. Because there's only a certain period of time you can actually play at a premium level. You need a team around you. So I suffered, and Mike Bailey left as well, which obviously didn't help because he went on to then coach at Charlton. So they sound like excuses, Alex, but it's just a consequence of the game, and obviously it still happens to this day, and probably more regularly now than it's ever done before. But like I said, it's not something that's discussed in the open environment, that how much players suffer because a manager stroke coach leaves.
Yeah. Winston, we've only got 40 minutes, so I can't go through your entire football career, but you went out to Hong Kong. Just tell us about that. You mentioned it at the beginning. What circumstances took you out there?
Well, by the time, I played a lot of games for Hereford, and again, 3 managers later, I was getting absolutely burnt out. I realized that this wasn't for me in terms of that level of football. And, the stadiums are a lot better now than they were then. But, you got to, on a cold Friday night, up to, I don't know, a Hartlepool or a Darlington. I mean, it wears on you. It really does wear on you. And, my life was becoming a little bit one-dimensional. Let's put it that way. And a tragedy happened. I lost my mother. My mother passed away when I was, still young. I was 23, maybe 24. And those kind of apron strings that keep you, towards home weren't there, even though I'm from a really good family. And I decided I just wanted to try something new. And Derek Spence, the Northern Ireland international, very famous player up in the Northwest, called me up, saw that I was available, and said, why don't you come to Hong Kong? They love players like you, quick, good feet. And, he was a striker at the time playing for a team called Hong Kong Rangers. Said, I think you'll be a perfect sort of supply chain for my striker. And I said, well, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And brilliant. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Total different culture change. It actually turned me into a man, to be honest, because I was, I had to learn on my own 2 feet. Footballers are wrapped in cotton wool a lot of the time. And I just said, yeah, this is how I need to really look after myself. And I had the time of my life. As I said, I played for a team called Hong Kong Rangers. Different, weird, and wonderful, but just so much fun. And that gave me the bug to travel, to be honest.
Yeah. I was chatting to Roger Eli, who went to China, and
Right.
he kind of suggested that he was like a big fish in a small pond. Did you feel that? Was your quality clear to see in Hong Kong? Was it easier to shine?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's a type of personality I am. If I'm playing the game with the freedom that I think all footballers, especially my type of footballer, can play, then I will shine every single time. I'm not the sort of player that you can well, if you coach me too much, then there's a problem. That's the bottom line of it. I'm very much an instinctive player, and I never felt overwhelmed in situations. I've got to be honest. I had nothing to lose going out to Hong Kong. It seemed to be a journey that I needed to make to find myself, without going too deep. I just enjoyed it. I just enjoyed the experience. I felt that it was something that it would never happen again. So I was like, just enjoy it. And I really liked it, because there's people like George Best out there. Who I met Bestie, he was awesome, and so yeah, great experience.
And while you were out there, Winston, did the yearning return to come back to the UK and play? Did you feel you had something to prove in any way? What was your driving force behind coming back to England?
Driving force is simple, that I still love the game, and I knew that they play the best football on pretty much on the planet, in England. So again, I was still very young. I was away for quite a long time, and when I came back, the league had already started. So again, the other thing about the game is the fact that you're forgotten about very quickly. If you're injured or you leave the country, you're forgotten about. And I came back, probably just as good as I left, but I had to earn my bones. But I came back because I knew that, firstly, I wanted to get back and be with my family and my friends, but I wanted to play the game. And so I had to become a little bit of a journeyman, going around to a few teams on trials and things like that. And I was very much in a position where I could pick and choose. And I did go to a couple of teams. I went to Stockport for a month. I went to Chesterfield for a month. Just didn't seem right. And I found my legs again at Bury. And as you know, Bury had a few former Burnley players there, people like Joey Jacob, Terry Pashley. So they welcomed me with open arms, and I hit the ground running at Bury. And Martin Dobson was the coach there. After Jim Eiley, who actually signed me, left, Martin Dobson came there. Brad Casper came as his assistant, and we were a terrific team. We had a player called Trevor Ross, from original Arsenal player. We had Lee Dixon there at one point, Arsenal player, and yeah, so we got promotion, and that's where the Burnley connection started. To be honest, Alex, because there was a lot of players that used to play for Burnley or went on to play for Burnley afterwards.
Yeah, well, we'll get onto the Clarets in a second, Winston. But in terms of Bury, that is I mean, the Burnley connections are huge. You've just said some of them, and people like Kevin Young and Roger Eli, Jamie Hoyland. The list goes on.
Right.
You must have been pretty sad to see the demise of Bury after in recent years.
Yeah, it was tragic. It was tragic. I mean, I actually went back to play for Bury towards the end of my career. I played about I think five games for them, and nothing changed at the club when I went back. That it was the same hardworking people that were the foundations of a lot of the clubs that I'd been to or heard about. You have these really hardworking people who just love their hometown clubs, and it was a real tragedy with Bury because you knew, that it was coming. And I think Bolton were in a similar situation, but Bolton had the capacity and the resource to get by. But with Bury, the writing seems to be on the wall because I used to stay in contact with a lot of the fans there and and the chairman, Terry Robinson, who was there when I was playing the first time around. So, you could see that the writing to a degree was on the wall, but when they actually had to pull the plug on it, it was absolutely tragic, and I know that they're still trying to get the club back together again, but it's tough. It's really, really difficult, especially when the bank pulls the plug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was really sad.
Yeah, I don't think they'll get back. I think it could be one of those, Winston. I don't think they'll get back for many years.
No, I agree.
Yeah. And then just Winston, give us an insight how things work in those days, because I guess football agents weren't on the scene like they are now, and the Burnley opportunity came along, and obviously Burnley had been through hellish times really, and seemed to be going nowhere quickly. Did Burnley still was Burnley still an attractive proposition despite the times that they were currently sitting in then?
Well, I'd played at Burnley probably 3 times before I actually signed for them, and the atmosphere was second to none at that level. The history was second to none. The players that came through that system were just fantastic. Even as far back as Andy Lockhead, I remember, who played for Leicester as well. I remember, I'd never heard of Burnley when I was at Leicester. And, but I remember Andy Lockhead came to Leicester and it was like, wow, it was a very uncompromising place, but it was a stadium that I really enjoyed playing at. And so I actually left Bury, went to Colchester United. I was there for a season and a bit. And but my draw attraction was always to the northwest because of my association with Bury. So when Brian Miller invited me to come back into the area, it was a bit of a no-brainer because of the history. Like I said, it was always that club that it pulled something special out of me, another 10, 15%. And it was very much a football town. And that's what I loved about it, still love about it to this day. And I still have loads of friends up there who update me as to what's going on. I've got a load of Facebook friends, who people I genuinely know, not just people that just want to befriend me. Just people I genuinely know who actually paid to watch me play. And if they're listening, I'll give them their money back. But no, it was fun. I really enjoyed my time there. So the history was legendary. And when Brian left, was sacked, Frank Casper took over, and that was obviously a reuniting with a coach that I knew very, very well. So that was an easy thing to become attached to the club. And as you say, with Joey, Jacob, and Terry Pashley, and others, Liam Robinson, it was fun. It was fun to be there, and I really enjoyed it.
What was it like playing for a club where there's an expectation not to be in that division a moment longer than you should be, where the fans, because of the history, that there's this kind of arrogance that we just shouldn't be here. Was that the thing that upped your game, or did it add pressure to your play or not?
No, it didn't. It didn't, Alex. It actually it added pressure, but I found it was good pressure. I enjoyed the demands and the expectations. I enjoyed the fact that if you didn't do your job, that the crowd would let you know about it. And listen, the Burnley fans are very, very knowledgeable. I mean, incredibly knowledgeable, and that's the thing that I loved about being there. Again, it goes back to what I said before. All those fantastic players that come through, it's no coincidence that all those players speak affectionately about Burnley. And I felt the same, when the crowd were cheering. And, even if sometimes there was only like, I don't know, 8,000 fans there, which is still a lot in that division when I was playing, they actually, raised the levels up to, you thought it was 25,000 there. So I love that atmosphere. I absolutely savor that atmosphere. And hopefully, I gave a decent value for money, because I remember in some of the big games, I had some of my best games when the crowd were really behind us. And we were the underdogs in some games. And I loved it. And I remember away matches as well, in particular. We'd go to a Blackpool, we'd go to a Bolton or Stockport, or, my gosh, I mean, it was just amazing, the following we had. And what was great about it, and sometimes difficult about it at times, is that you knew so many of the fans, because it was this cauldron of people that you'd see walking down the street. So you'd score a goal, you'd run up to the fans, and you'd see faces that you genuinely knew. And that there was something special about that, and a real throwback to the great times of when I was growing up, where footballers were approachable. So there's something special about Burnley. And I love the pressure, because it made me a better player.
The biggest compliment I can give you, Winston, is I remember those days very well. And me and my mate Craig, we followed Burnley all over the place. But when you were on the ball, there was an expectation something might happen, and that wasn't always the case with some of our players during those days. And you were an exciting player. You must have enjoyed the thrill of that, having the ability to make a game turn on its head.
I do, Alex. And if I was a genuine winger. My game changed over the last sort of 4 or 5 years of my career, because the formats of the game had changed, and you had to play more as a midfield player, stroke wing back, as the sort of the game changed, if you will. But so I played at centre midfield at times for Burnley, but I always had the same ingredients. I always liked to go past players. I always liked to have a trick that I could perform, but for the betterment of the team. Not I wasn't a show pony. I know they used to have this thing about me, that I was the instigator of the crop circles. I remember that. I loved that with affection, because if I felt that I couldn't play the ball forward, I would turn away until a better option came along. Now I'd be, in this day and age, I think I'd be seen as a football genius, to be perfectly honest with you.
That makes me laugh. That the instigator of the crop circles. Well,
I loved it. I loved that title. I thought it was great, because I knew that I never wanted to give the ball away.
And maybe that'll be on your gravestone, eh?
Well, I don't know about that. I think I'd like to think that he was a generous guy and he died a billionaire. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
That'd be lovely, yeah. And just who were some of your mates in the Burnley squad at that time, Winston? Who did you have an affinity to? I mean, I'm sure you all got on well, but anybody in particular?
Yeah, I loved Ian Measham. Ian Measham was a great guy. And again, you talk about sort of relationships in the game. It's difficult because it's a very transitional game. People move on and stuff like that. But I had a great respect and admiration for Ian Measham, because he was just a hard-working footballer. So he was probably one of my best buddies. I got on with all of them, to be honest. Brendan, to this day, Brendan O'Connor's a good buddy of mine. He's up in Canada now. and we stay in touch all the time. Steve Davis, great lad, great lad. Joey, Joey, one of the funniest guys. Joey Jacob, one of the funniest guys I've ever met in the game. And I know that Leighton James wouldn't like to say that I was his friend, but we got on very well, me and Taffy. I like Leighton. He was probably the most miserable man I've ever met in the game, but also his knowledge of the game was phenomenal, and I really liked Taffy. I thought he was just a decent bloke.
Yeah.
And so there was a few that I hold affection for. I don't think there was one person that I didn't dislike. John Francis, great guy. Roger, I always liked Roger. Hardworking, charismatic. So yeah, there were so many, Alex. And it's difficult to, as I say, to keep these relationships because people move on and so on, and I had to move on, unfortunately.
Yeah. Winston, I just want to ask you about racism in football. I mean, gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I remember when I was a kid, we actually, me and my mate Craig, Burnley were playing far away, and we decided to go and watch Blackburn. And they were playing Man City. And I'm sure you remember, I think it was Alex Williams, the goalkeeper.
Yes, I do. I know Alex very well, yes.
And he came out and people were throwing bananas. Yeah. And I was only a young kid. And I just, to this day, I still can't make much of that, really. It's just other than horror. But how are we at a position now, do you think, where we're still talking about this? I mean, that must be 30 odd years ago. Yeah. And what's your view of how football deals with racism?
Well, it doesn't deal with it. That's the reality. It does not deal with it. And I've been a victim of that. Bananas being thrown, the monkey chants, and all kinds of things that, even off the pitch, So the football doesn't deal with it at all. But because football wants to be led. But unfortunately, for football, it's a leader. Because if it's allowed to happen in that sort of atmosphere and environment, then it gives people carte blanche for it to happen outside that environment. So the way the authorities are dealing with it is pretty, I think, lame. Firstly, you have organizations like the PFA, whose sole job is the welfare of the players. And you have the FA, whose sole job it is to retain the integrity of the game. So those two organizations collectively just do not seem to be finding a solution. And for me, the solution is really, really simple. I love the game. I absolutely love the game. And if somebody said to me that you could never, ever go and watch a live game again, or have any part in any sort of football whatsoever, that would be like pulling out my lungs, right? So these so-called, and I don't call them fans, these so-called fans who come to the game with the sole purpose of vilifying these different people who look different to them. If they were given a full-on ban completely, right? For me, it's a sharp message to everybody involved. We live in a day and age where there's cameras everywhere. We live in a day and age where you can hear everything. Are you telling me that they can't identify these people? If you look outside of the game and I'm walking down the street and somebody shouts something at you, a racist thing, and you hear other people hear that, I mean, that's an offense, right? So why is it allowed to happen in a stadium where it's a confined environment where they could actually keep those people in there, right? They've actually got them. They're actually in the stadium. Yeah. So I don't honestly understand why they haven't found a solution. Look, going down on one knee is a message, right? It's a message that is unacceptable. But how long can that go on for? It blows my mind, really, how these so-called custodians of the game cannot just see that for what it is. It is wrong on so many different levels, and they've got to find the solution. And you know, when the teams eventually, and they will at some point, or walk off the pitch, they will walk off the pitch and they'll say, no, not in my game. My teammate is not going to be subjected to that. That's when something will be done. So what they're ultimately doing, just like the Colin Kaepernick situation here, what they're ultimately doing is making the players make the decisions. And that's what's going to happen. You're going to get team revolt and they're going to walk off. And then there's no football. And then they're going to have this massive debate.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to go on a little bit.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be said, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts were about, talk about taking the knee. I mean, Wilfried Zaha no longer takes the knee. Would you take the knee if you were playing now?
100%. 100%. Yeah, I would, because in the absence of nothing, that's something. Wilfried Zaha has his own view. That's fine. I think he said, "What's the point?" Well, I think that he needs to have a little bit of a history check, and then I think he'll realize that something's better than nothing. You've got to keep it in the mind's eye, because when we thought it went away in the 90s, remember, it was the all-seater stadiums. We all thought that it would, and it did, go away for a little while. But it's still here, and it's worse now, because people know that it does affect the whole environment. They can get recognized, and the stuff on social media, it's horrendous. So it's not just in the game, it's social media as well. So yes, I would. In a word, I would. Yes, I'd take a knee, and I'd probably go to other levels as well. I'd probably become very active out there, trying to help young players of my color and people of color, to try to understand that this is unacceptable.
Winston, I sit on the inclusion advisory panel at Burnley, which is not as grand as it sounds at all. And under the previous administration, the policy was being, you talked about kind of kicking them out. I think the policy generally has been, well, we'll kick them out for a while and we'll try and educate them. Do you think there's value in that? Or do you think it's kind of, one strike and you're out kind of thing? Or do you think, I'm just trying to, I don't want to go too deep on this, but maybe it's necessary, but the demographic of the town and some of the people that live within it, and thinking about the area where I live, that can be very challenging, and not just about race relations, about everything, about social standing and everything. What's your take on that? Do you stick by, if you make a racist remark, that's it? Or is it, you make a racist remark, well, you're going to be out for a while and I'm going to educate you until I feel you're at a place in time where you're actually, you've learned, and you've kind of, retribution has been served and you're now welcome back into Turf Moor. What's your view?
Well, my view is that, yes, it should be a lifetime ban, right? And there has to be extraordinary circumstances, or that person or that group of people have to do extraordinary things to earn the right to actually become integrated into that football world again. And when I say extraordinary, I mean extraordinary. They have to go on to some form of, it is an educational thing, because if you look at the amount of, okay, if we just take Burnley as an example, if you look at the amount of black players that play for Burnley, I lived in Padiham, right, just on the edge of Padiham, and I purchased a small terraced house on a nice street. The only time I ever had anything that was remotely racist was when I left. And I think that was more to do, to be honest with you, more to the fact that I left Burnley, to be honest, more than the racism thing. I think just people were angry that I left. But, I never, ever suffered any kind of racial discrimination. And at the time, I had Roger Eli there, John Francis there. I remember Junior Bent came for a while. I'm trying to think of other black players. We had had a big centre half, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that's as far as my memory goes. I mean, obviously John and Roger were big players there. We never had a major conversation about racism at Burnley, playing for Burnley. Yes, I was the only one that lived in the town, and I knew a lot of the local people. What I would say is this: is that racism exists, but I conducted myself in the way that people knew that in football terms, I wanted the same as them. In life terms, I also wanted the same as them. Nobody was inferior enough for me to talk to. I didn't feel intimidated by so-called superior people. I treated people exactly the same, at whatever level. It didn't matter. And so, in my way, I wanted people to know who weren't introduced to black people on a regular basis that I was just a regular guy who just happened to have a fantastic job that they paid to watch me do. Now, I think I was humble in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
And but that was kind of my personality. A lot of players don't have that coping mechanism, and I understand that. And I just wish that they could understand, these fans understand the impact that it has, not just if they're saying it to the opposition player who is not like them, but the impact it has on their own team that happens to have black players as well, or players of color. So, this resonates all the way through. And like, I can only talk about my experiences, Alex. And I just think that there has to be a sharp response to it. And I think that the response is, you're not going again. You are done unless you prove that you've really paid your debt to the society that you've hurt. And yeah, the fact that we're having this conversation in 2021 is tragic.
Yeah.
So kudos to you, sir, the fact that you're on this panel. And hopefully, if I said anything of note that you can maybe take with you, or if you want to have a Zoom call in terms of when you're on a panel and you want me to talk on that, I'll be happy to do that, because it's something that's needs to be addressed and got rid of as soon as possible, because the game will grow even more than it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Winston. I will indeed forward that to the relevant people for them to take, because I think it's a real insight from somebody who's got experience and who's played for the fabulous club. And just to finish, Winston, you must be delighted how Burnley have done in recent years. Have you been home at all to see them in any way, or not? Have you managed to get back, or?
No, well, I got back a couple of times. Veronica, who's a stalwart of Burnley, she's been great. As you know, she was involved with the Clarets on Tour thing, and I went back a couple of times. They weren't in the Premier League at the time. I think they were in the Championship, and I think it was Cardiff they played. Anyway, I went and got a great reception on the halfway line. It was fantastic. I mean, I just wish I could have got my boots on and played, but yeah, it was terrific. So I just love the fact of where Burnley are now, and it's going to be a tough season for them this season. There's no doubt about it. I think people know how they play, and but what I would say to people is the way that Burnley are playing more football now than I think they've ever done before could be actually to their detriment this season. Because they're playing more football on the ground now than I think I've seen them play in the last 5 seasons they've been in the Premier League, and that might cause them a problem. I'm not being, it might sound a negative to a ball player like me, but I don't know. They seem to get a little bit more possession in matches, and ultimately I think that might cost them. So they may have to resort to what people have been saying they are. You know, and you know, I mean, the two boys up front, Woods and Barnes. I mean, they probably need another. They probably need another big striker up there, to be honest with you, an uncompromising, you know, centre forward of that sort of ilk, because that is how Burnley will keep going, and that's how they have kept going. But they're playing more football. I think it's costing them a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Winston, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I know because I'm a diehard Claret, I know the affinity that the fans hold you in, and many of them will have not have heard from you for many years. So I think they'll be delighted to see this and hear you talk with such insight and care really about the game that you love and we all love. And so Winston, thanks so much for coming on. We send our love to you from Burnley. The sun's out here. It's not quite Florida weather, but it's quite nice for mid-September. So Winnie, thanks very much. God bless.
Alex, I really appreciate it. Have a good one, and all the best to the Burnley fans out there, and up the Clarets. Cheers.